2022, back with our February wine of the month. This month I wanted to focus on a region that I think is often overlooked and a little bit underestimated given its history. But right now, specifically in the Pennsylvania state stores, there's a really good example that I found that I think has a place in everyone's cellar, and I want to talk about it. So let's jump right in. The region is Chianti, and the bottle we're going to review is the 2015 Castello di Monsanto Chianti Classico Riserva. So let's break that name down a little bit. Number one, it's a Chianti. So we know it comes from the central part of Italy in the Tuscany region. Okay, the key grape, the primary grape that goes into Tuscan-based wines is Sangiovese. Sangiovese produces a lighter colored, kind of medium body, fairly highly acidic red wine with typical notes of tart cherry or sour cherry. And if it's just a Chianti, typically you do get some of these lighter, fresher, more acidic styles that you've probably come accustomed to when you see them in the straw flask, those very cheap bottles of Chianti, okay? But in this bottle we see something else. This is a Chianti Classico, so let's go to the next step. Now, in Italian wine, Classico typically means the original region where these grapes were originally planted. Kind of before the demand grew and people started planting outside that region and still labeling it that. So Classico in this case means the area between Florence and Siena, roughly, the original historical area where the Sangiovese grapes in Chianti were planted. So we know this is kind of a Classico region. And in fact, it's so much so in Chianti that there is a separate wine region, Chianti Classico, that's separate from Chianti in terms of the way that the wine laws are governed. So with Italian wine law, you've got kind of three levels of quality. The highest level is the DOCG, Denominazione di Origine Controllata e Garantita. Then you've got the DOC, which is the Denominazione di Origine Controllata. And then you've got the IGT, Indicazione Geografica Tipica. Okay, these are the three kind of levels of quality in Italian wine. Now, up until 1996, you could label anything in about a quarter of the area of Tuscany as Chianti. Okay, and in '96, Chianti Classico got its own DOCG regulations to separate it from kind of that broader area of Chianti. So if you see Chianti Classico, you know it's one of the kind of the original areas where this grape really took off. A couple key differences between those wine laws for Chianti and Chianti Classico. Classico has to have a minimum of 80% Sangiovese in the blend, whereas Chianti has to have 70, so a little higher Sangiovese content. No white grapes allowed at all in the Sangiovese, in the Chianti Classico, whereas you can have up to 10%, 5 to 10% of Malvasia and Trebbiano grapes in your Chianti, but not in the Chianti Classico. A little bit more aging, so I think a year versus 6 months required on a Chianti Classico. So a couple just kind of different things there that go along. Now, we also see Riserva here. Okay, so what does Riserva mean? Riserva really is an aging requirement. So it's just been kept longer in the cellar. The winemakers picked the grapes they thought were going to do better with some bottle age. In the case of Chianti Classico Riserva, I believe it's 2 years in barrel and then 3 months in the cellar. Longer skin contact. You're going to get a little bit more darker cherry, a little plum out of this. It's not going to be that kind of fresh, vibrant, acidic tart cherry. It's going to be a little darker, a little deeper. So if you kind of go from light to heavy, you're thinking Chianti, Chianti Classico, Chianti Classico Riserva. Okay. There was actually in 2014 another level in Chianti Classico called Gran Selezione, which has to have 30 months of bottle age. All the fruit has to come from estate. I haven't had a lot of those to really kind of tell you the differences, but those are kind of the levels of Chianti. Now, the French word that I talk about a lot when I talk about wine of terroir really kind of means, you know, it's a term with no literal translation, but it's really meant to explain why a wine tastes. It's kind of the expression of everything that goes into it, from the grape variety to the soil, even the soul or the intent of the winemaker, the generational knowledge that's been passed down from generation to generation, and certainly the climate. But in some cases, it's not just the weather patterns, it's also the socio-political climate of the region that can impact the flavor on the wine, believe it or not. And in Chianti, up until the really 60s, 70s, and 80s, they were subject to a sharecropping system called Mezzadria. And in that case, you had a landowner that owned kind of the castle and all the vineyards around it, and the peasants were able to work on that land, but they owed the landowner 50% of the crop. So if you think about the way that grapes are grown, you know, you don't want to grow as much fruit as possible. You want to limit the production on a vine to get higher quality fruit. But if you're in a sharecropping system where at the end of the year, 50% of what you make has to go to a landowner, you're going to produce for quality over quantity. Really, so up until kind of the 80s, you know, we really weren't getting very good wines out of this region. But it started to change as the Mezzadria system went away and the new DOCG was allowed. It also led to the rise of something called Super Tuscans, which a lot of people have probably heard of, where you had winemakers that were intent on making the best expression of wine they could make out of their Tuscan estates without being subject to these laws around how much sangiovese had to go into it, and the fact that they couldn't use small oak barrels to age. And so you had the rise of these Super Tuscans, which included international varieties such as Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot and even Syrah in some of the blends. And those wines are some of the best wines coming out of Tuscany right now. So it's really influenced a lot of the Italian wine laws. Now, Castello de Monsanto was founded by in the 60s by a guy named Fabrizio Bianchi, and he was intent on kind of imagining what could be done on this estate. So he immediately started upgrading things in the vineyard, planted a brand new vineyard site called Appoggio, which is the hill. That's kind of their best expression of Sangiovese. A lot of that doesn't make it out of the winery; it's stored there as kind of an archive. But has really done a lot to modernize the winemaking techniques there as well, including aging in smaller barrels. The Hilltop Castle is actually still on the label. So if you look at that again, that's kind of the original castle on the estate, and that's still there in Chianti Classico. So let's jump right into this. Now the site on this, I mentioned that Chianti typically is a lighter colored wine, and that is true. This is fairly translucent. It's a bright ruby red. It's a little darker than you'd expect from a $7 or $8 Chianti for sure, because it did have some extended maceration, picked up a little bit more color, and then had some time in barrel. On the nose, there's a kind of a tobacco note, kind of like putting your nose in a cigar box almost. And it's not that tart cherry. It's definitely some darker fruit like plum and some black cherry for sure. There's a cherry note, but it's not real tart, I would say. A little bit of almost iron and some mushroomy notes. Definitely some earth on this too. It's very, very nice nose. Let's jump in and have a sip. Yeah, medium bodied. This is only 2015. Definitely some grippy tannins, but very velvety, very smooth tannin finish. Kind of a dusty cherry, almost a dusty note to this wine. Very fruit forward, but still very young, and a lot of structure here that's going to allow this thing to age for quite a while. Yeah, this is really nice wine. I think this is $24.99 right now in the state stores, and is readily available. So I highly recommend you pick one of these up. Give Chianti Classico Riserva a try if you haven't had a Chianti in a while. I think it'll open your eyes to a different region to try, and certainly this is a fantastic example. So guys, if you enjoy these videos, please let me know, like, comment, let me know what else I can be talking about here, other regions, other wine topics. Always excited to put out content that makes the world of wine a slightly smaller place and helps you navigate a little bit more. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel so that you can see upcoming videos and make sure you don't miss those. Until next time, the world of wine is a big place, so here's to drinking new varietals, drinking new regions. Cheers.